Are you looking for new books to read? Do you like finding a new special author? Are you tired of the same old books from the same old authors? Well then, welcome to Discovered Wordsmiths, a podcast where you can hear from fantastic new authors. Join Stephen Schneider as he finds and talks to authors you may not know, but authors that have worked hard to write great new books. Hear about their book and why you should check it out. So sit back and listen to today's Discovered Wordsmith.
Today on the podcast, I've got Samantha Hart, the author of Blind Pony, a true story as near as I can tell. Is that correct?
As true a story as I can tell.
As true a story as I can tell. Well, Samantha, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So before we get talking about your book, finding out about what it's about, tell us a little bit about you, what you like to do, what you do outside or before you wrote and published.
Well, I started my career in quite young. I was working as a photo stylist. I did a little modeling. I traveled a lot and learned a lot from those travels around the world. And when I really started my career in earnest, it was in the music business. And I had the privilege of working at Geffen Records in the heyday, when there was a lot of exciting bands. It was indie rock and roll. It was Aerosmith, Nirvana, Guns N' Roses. It was that whole era. And then I segued my career as a creative director into indie movie marketing. And I had the privilege of working for Gramercy Pictures, which is now Focus Features, and I worked on films like Dazed and Confused. There was recently a book out, The Oral History of Richard Linklater's Dazed and Confused, and I was interviewed for that because I did the marketing campaign for the film. And I worked on Four Weddings and a Funeral, and we were really cutting new ground because back then, British films weren't very popular in the US yet. If you can believe it, they wanted, when we sent bicycle prints around the United States, they were saying, "Can you send us a subtitled version? We can't understand it." So, it was like a different time. It was definitely indie filmmaking. And I worked on Boys Don't Cry and Full Monty, and that was before I started at Searchlight, and Waking Ned Divine, and went on to work at Universal for larger films like Meet the Parents, and then I started my own company, and I had several offices, and I ran a company of like 50 people, and we were doing I called it indie advertising, where we were one of the first companies, and our hub was in Chicago. And we were traditionally a post house initially. And then we expanded into production, and we put everything under one roof so that we could do, everything soup to nuts. And then at some point I got it became tedious because I really started that company because I wanted to create a company where I wanted to work. And it, like everything, it kind of blew up and became this big company, and it wasn't satisfying me, and I wanted to do the creative work, not just the production and post. I wanted to actually start writing the ads and doing more creative work that way. So we kind of ended that era, and when we moved back to Los Angeles, my partner and I, and we started Wild Bill, our company now, and we work on a much smaller, more nimble model, and take on more of the projects that we are interested in. We help a lot of startups. We do a lot of nonprofit work. We do big campaigns still, but it's sort of with a bent of trying to be more creative with it. And So it was during the time that I started Wild Bill. I kind of also selfishly wanted to do that because I wanted to start writing. Um, that was always my passion, was writing, and I've kept journals since I was 12 years old. And so, everybody's always said to me over the years at cocktail parties or whatever, you should write a book. You should write a book, because I have a lot of very funny stories about my life. And as you can imagine, I was a teenage runaway. I ran away when I was 14. So when you start that young, you have a lot of stories. And definitely you have a lot of experiences as a fish out of water type person. And so I think that initially people were saying you should write a book because they thought it was so extraordinary, all these stories. When I finally had the time to write, I really realized what I had to write about was actually very painful and sad. And it became a real catharsis for me. And, and then I would put it away because it was just too emotional for me. I just shove it in a drawer. And I have three children. I have a granddaughter and I have two teenage sons. And so have been a mother most of my life, actually. And so between running my company and my children and doing all my creative work or whatever, I was just like, yeah, the book, whatever. But then when the pandemic hit, and our company kind of shut down, I really had the time to really go back and look at it again with fresh eyes and in a different place in my life. And it really hit me. I have to tell this story. I have to. It became kind of my heart's mission, just to finish it. And so I did. And
Nice.
that's Blind Pony, as true stories I can tell.
Up to this point.
So, pardon?
Up to this point. For
Yeah,
the memoir. Yeah.
exactly.
So jumping back real quick for a second, uh, what you mentioned Aerosmith, Guns N' Roses, and some good movies like Waking the Divine and that. What did you do with the music industry and the movie industry?
Okay, well, in the music industry, I started out working for Neil Diamond's publishing company, and I kind of was just knew nothing about the music business. Just kind of, it's a long story I won't go into, but just kind of ended up sort of living in the basement cellar of this music publishing office, kind of like a little rat down in the cellar, and started, working as a secretary and answering the phone. And I was terrible at it, by the way. Um, and I got better at it toward. I mean, it required very fast typing, and I didn't have the skill set, but anyway, I kind of faked my way through that. But I learned a lot about music publishing, and then I went to Chapel Intersong, and at Chapel Intersong, I really think I developed a lot of musical taste. Um, and then, I heard about a job. I worked at Chapel. I assisted a song plugger, an A&R kind of, artist and repertoire song plugger. And I got like fascinated with the old catalog of Bernie Taupin that he wrote with Martin Page that not a lot of people knew about. And then those songs blew up with Hart, had a hit with it. And so did Jefferson Starship. We Built the City was one of them. Uh, so, just developing my taste or whatever. So then I heard about this job at Wyndham Hill, and it was to work in the A&R slash production division, but being the assistant to this woman who ran it. And I thought, well, I kind of know that A&R. Like, I have great taste in music, and so it sounded perfect. And I'll assist, and I'll apprentice under her, and I'll learn things, right? And the day I started, literally, she quit. There was some big blow up. So they took the A&R part, the artist and repertoire part of it away, and it was strictly a production job. When you say production, I thought, producing records, like it was going to be fun, right? No, this was nuts and bolts production, like making masters, and the old fashioned way at the time, and printing the covers and, going on press and, all that kind of stuff. And so I knew nothing about that. And I always had I always had an interest in graphic design from my early years, assisting a photographer and doing styling and set decorating. Um, but like and then I did have a job at a design firm, as a freelancer or whatever, and I was interested in that, but I didn't know how to put all the pieces together. I mean, again, you're talking about someone with very little life experience, running away at 14. How do you put the building blocks together to build a career for yourself? I didn't even, I mean, I just kind of was flying by the seat of my pants most of the time. So I'll never forget, Windham Hill was distributed by A&M Records, and they asked me to, I had to go to the production meeting to represent Windham Hill my first week. And again, I knew nothing about what they were talking about. So they're going around this big conference table, and I'm sitting there, um, and they said, they're talking about shipping the parts and this plant and that pressing plant, and eh, whatever. And then they said, Windham Hill, have you shipped the parts yet? And I just blankly stared at them and said, the wing or the thigh? Like chicken parts. I mean, I was like admitting, you may as well be talking chicken parts. I have no idea what you're talking about. And, it was it just stunned the room. And then there was giggling, but it really wasn't at my expense. People loved it, because they kind of heard that the story that I came over, and A&M Records was always looking at Windham Hill as like, the silly, the effete label, but it's kind of the little stepsister over here that doesn't know what she's
Right.
doing. And they're actually very smart people, Windham Hill, and I learned a lot working there. But I learned so much from A&M. So Aubrey Moore, the head of production, just looked at me, and he just loved that I wasn't trying to pose. I wasn't trying to be insincere or sarcastic. I was just kind of, putting my cards on the table, so to speak. And he just turned to his right hand woman and he said, get this kid up to speed, Janice. And she did. And within a month, I could have told you anything about pressing records. And I was going on press checks for Windham Hill and, in Chicago, and really just busting a move. And I became very good at it. And I was recruited by Geffen Records to come because they had the same kind of dynamic with Warner Brothers. They were distributed by Warner Brothers. So they wanted sort of me to come in and be the liaison with Warner Brothers, because at the time the Whitesnake album was exploding, and they wanted me to be there to sort of push the production executive to get our records on press before Warner Brothers. So a lot of it was just, this nuts and bolts production. And then I grew into more of the graphic arts, and I started the art department, the creative department. And then I went on to invent a package that kind of revolutionized how CDs were shipped from the old, I don't know if you recall the old long boxes, the 6 by
Yeah, yeah.
12s. Um, well, it was Jetson technology in a Flintstone package, right? It was this two 6 by 12s fit in a rack as a 12 by 12 album. Then they just didn't want to retrofit. So it was, it's like, so I kind of had that kind of a mind, or I have that kind of a mind where I sort of look at things, and if it just seems silly, I want to change it. And so, I kind of, was talking about digital film delivery in the film business long before, and streaming and day and date releases way back in the late 90s, long before it was a thing. So, I just, that's just like, so then, at Geffen, I was just known as like a disruptor. And, like when the Nirvana Baby came out, It was Kurt's idea to put the baby on the cover, but he had found a photo he liked of a baby girl, and it was way too expensive for an indie band. And it was like a $10,000 photo or something. So the art director and creative director and me, threw the bunch of babies in a pool at a swimming class. And the art director found this, Robert Fisher is the art director. He found of this baby boy. And I'm like, we were all like, that's perfect. We loved it. And so I took it up to the marketing, to the president, to the marketing meeting. And they were like, well, the penis has to go. And at the time, it was like, the verbiage was Cytex the penis off. And I'm like, well, why would you want to go and do that? This is a boy band. I mean, it makes perfect sense. Well, Walmart won't carry it. And I'm like, well, maybe that's a good thing. Walmart won't carry it. So it became a whole thing. And, so I've always been known as kind of a disruptor. And I went to get David Geffen and fought for that. And, kind of, you know, it's hard to describe what I did there in terms of like, um, you know, I kind of went off into different. The great thing about working at Geffen was David had sort of a thing where we had business cards, but they didn't say what you did on it. He said, if people don't know what you do, then you're not doing it. And so it allowed me the freedom to kind of think out of the box and go beyond my comfort zone. And I created a package that sort of revolutionized everything because it folded onto itself, and so you did not throw it away. So it was, but the real impetus behind it was getting rid of the box, because to ship something this big is a lot less than shipping something this big, if you think about it. All the CDs were being shipped out of Terre Haute, Indiana at the time. And, you know, that's all across the country, all around the world. That's a lot of money, right? For shipping something that large that you really don't need. You're going to throw it away. So it kind of worked out, and then I tell a story in the book. I don't really talk about my career all that much in the book. It's more about my arc of becoming a woman, just growing up.
Okay.
But I do mention a story about being handed again all these like ledgers at Geffen by the CFO. And, what am I supposed to do with this? Well, just study it. It's all these numbers and things. And I happened to notice that we were being charged 5 cents a unit to fold J cards, the old J card for cassettes. And when I
Right.
went
Right.
to visit the plant one time, I noticed that it had been automated. And so I asked the guy, how long has this been automated? He told me about 2 years. So they retroactively gave all of Warner Electrosylum the rebate for that,
Nice. Nice.
charging 5 cents a unit to hand operate, you know. So
So,
that's
so
kind of what I did
obviously,
there.
obviously, you've got stories and you've got good stories to tell. But you said your book isn't actually about those stories. So tell us about the book. What is it about, and why did you want to write this book right now?
Well, I think that, before I knew it, I felt that I suddenly, as I became to this stage in my life, it really began to occur to me that, my childhood was kind of stolen from me. I never really had the opportunity to have a normal childhood. I was abused from the time I was 5 years old. And I, which is why I ran away. And it really affected me because I think that in many ways I had like a lot of developmental arrest, because I was so busy trying to pretend I was grown up that I never really grew up. And I think, if that makes sense on
Yeah,
some
it sounds like you
abstract,
fit right into the rock and roll industry.
possibly. Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, Steven Tyler definitely, told me he had developmental arrest, and, that's why he could get away with pulling his pants down and at the Four Seasons Hotel and mooning me in the jacuzzi, I mean, it almost killed me on an 80-foot dive in Hawaii. So, because he abandoned me when he was supposed to be my buddy. And then I was saved by the famous producer, Bob Ezrin, rest his soul. Anyway, yeah, I have a lot of stories like that, but that wasn't really the heart of what, kept nagging at me. And I was going through, some of my old journals, and I came upon a journal, and this is in the preface of my book, that I wrote when I was 12 years old. And it said, "This is a story about me, nobody special." And like, why do you want to read this book? It's about me, nobody special. And I really felt like I started crying. I read those words in my little handwriting and little hearts and things. And I said, I really felt when I was 12, I wanted to tell this story of what happened to me. And I thought it was important. And so looking back, all of a sudden in reflective mode and seeing the whole trajectory in front of me of what happened to me, it really underscored I really need to talk about this. And I've discovered, um, I I called the book Blind Pony because I was literally given a blind pony, um, by my grandfather. And he was the one abusing me. And he did it, as a form of control over me. I had sisters and they were all given, beautiful horses. And he gave me this, like, sort of, this, she had been a show pony. She had her eye kicked out. And she, she was damaged, which is how I felt all these years. And so, it really stuck with me. And I kind of used that as a metaphor throughout the book, of hearing the galloping, just sort of being left in the dust by my sisters galloping up the hill because they all had, stronger horses, and my horse shied a lot. And she had to be sort of taken care of, coddled or whatever, because she spooked at a lot of things. And it just occurred to me that, I kind of had to do that for myself, you know, so that I wouldn't go off the track, so I wouldn't spook at things. I had to be very brave. I had to, take care of myself. And so I just really felt motivated to tell this story. And so since doing so, I really have developed, you know, a, a lot of people have gravitated to the story. And, I've discovered there are a lot of blind ponies out there, as I like to say, because, the story isn't unique, that unfortunately. I mean, of course, certain things about it are unique to me, but, a lot of people have been, hurt and damaged, and unrightfully so. And there's no recompense for them. There's nothing they can do, but, you know, they are afraid to tell people, and they're afraid to talk about it. And if I can make one person feel okay about having their childhood disrupted, but going on to be successful despite all these things, or, being, at a place like, this one woman contacted me. I was on a small television station broadcast in Louisville, Kentucky, and she happened to hear it. Very successful woman, happened to hear the show, and she reached out to me on LinkedIn, and she said that she started crying. She had to hide it from her, um, coworkers, because my story was her story, in a manner of speaking. And she said, like, I have never talked about it with anybody, and it's such a responsibility for me to hear something like that. I'm not a psychologist. I mean, I've gone to plenty of therapy, obviously, um, but, I don't have, all I can say is, what I did, what helped me was, and make people make fun of it, journaling, certainly helped me. And then going to therapy and talking about it and being honest about it. And kind of coming out of the closet in a way and just saying, yeah, this is who I really am. Um, really helped me. I mean, at one point, some I was really trying to hide my Pittsburgh accent, and someone thought I sounded British. So then I became British. And then, and at one point I had to use someone else's ID to get a job in, yeah, selling alcohol. So then I became Angie. I mean, it was like I had so many identities and so many different things I was juggling. And who am I? It's like, at one point you know, the, uh, the, the boss was going, Angie, Angie, yelling my name. And I didn't turn around because like, I didn't know he was talking to me. So, I would forget I was Angie. Um, and then another guy thought I sounded Australian. He goes, "You have a real French aesthetic for being Australian." And then I was like, "Oh, he doesn't believe I'm from England. Okay, I'm Australian now." That's further away. I'll have to know less about it. I was just going. I mean, it sounds crazy, but it's all true. And when I really thought about these things and this, 15, 16-year-old girl going in and playing backgammon with guys in their 40s, and beating their asses, it's a really funny story you read about in the book of how I learned to play backgammon. But it's also very sad, you know, right? I mean, it's like but I did whatever I had to do to survive basically. And if a lot of men took advantage of me or whatever, at least it was my choice for them to be taking advantage of me. I knew they were taking advantage of me. I was really a savvy little girl, but it wasn't somebody abusing me, like in the way that I had no control over, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and that for me, it wasn't a matter of the heart anymore. It was just a matter of my body. I could be okay with that. Um, it was a very difficult child growing up, period. And I think
sounds
that
like
when
it.
I got my daughter, had my daughter, my life really changed for the better.
It does sound like you've had an interesting life, if nothing else. Um, but it sounds like there's a lot of good feedback from people who have read the book that it's made a difference, made an
Incredible.
impact.
I mean, I never knew what to expect, and I mean, to see, I've got thousands of 5-star reviews on Goodreads, and I told someone recently, I was stunned when I got 1 star, 2 stars. I mean, but 5 stars, and people really relate to the book. I know it's a difficult book to read in some of the chapters, but I think you had to know everything about the painful side to be able to, grow with the character, and understand some of her motivation. And like, I've had readers tell me they're screaming at the book, like, don't do that, don't go there, But she, like, why is she doing this? Why can't she be smarter than that? I was 16 years old, and I'd already been on my own by that time for 2 years. So I graduated high school by the seat of my pants. I tested out of classes. I took correspondence courses. It was really meaningful to me not to be a high school dropout. And, though that, so it was just, um, can you still hear me? Something happened to my headset.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
No, you're good.
oh, when switched over to my computer. Um, So I just, you know, all I can say is I'm glad I wrote the book. And like I said, if it helps one person out there, to be your authentic self is the best version of yourself. It, what I mean? It's like to be at this place in my life and to be able to tell people and be honest about, I wasn't some rich kid growing up, I mean, when I worked at Geffen, I mean, I'd go out and spend $3,000 on an outfit to go to a meeting, I was very stylish. People thought, they never thought I was someone who had such an arduous childhood. I never let anyone in on that side of myself. And in relationships, nothing. Like I just didn't go there. I didn't want to talk about being from a farm in Pennsylvania and being abused, and it was a very dark place, um and neglected as well, parental neglect. So but now I feel very free, and I feel very happy and satisfied that there's no sort of skeleton in my closet, that's going to jump out and at any moment and blow everything for me or whatever. You know what I mean? It's like it's a very free feeling.
So let me ask this: with your book, because I know it's a memoir and it's a very personal book. If you had the chance to turn this into either a movie or a TV show, which would you choose and like to see it as?
Um, well, at this point, I would have to say definitely a series, because it's too epic to be a film. It really is. And I have thought about this, and I spent a good part of my career in indie film, as I told you. And to me, I'm actually surprised it hasn't been snatched up yet, because it's really, I've worked on films that were, um, difficult sells or whatever. This is just, it's all there. I mean, Queen's Gambit had chess, and this has backgammon. I mean, it's hysterical, and it's, and I think that flawed female characters are so popular right now. So I'm definitely leaning toward series, and I won't be surprised that it'll be picked up, because it's a really rich story, and it's an incredible vehicle for a young actress. It's
Who would you
because
like
there's so
to
much
play you?
range that she has to become three different people with all these different accents, and it's just, and it goes from Pennsylvania to Phoenix, Arizona, to Los Angeles, to London, to Paris, to Hamburg. I left out Stockholm, Sweden, and Japan because it was just too much to cover. But it's really an epic story, and I think it's a very heartfelt story. You know, like I said, there are some difficult things to read in the book, but that's easy to kind of skate around in a series. You don't have to be
So
explicit.
who would you like to? So, Samantha, who would you like to play you? Which actress?
Gosh, a lot of people have actually asked me that, and it depends on when the film is made, because the character is so young. Um, I think it's got to be someone who's an up and comer. We don't even know who they are. Because films take a while to put into production, and so who I like today might be too old by the time the film's made. So it
Right.
needs to be
Yeah.
somebody who can play the range. I think it's two different. The younger Sam, and um than the older, but she'd have to really go from age 14 to, when she hits the road, or, when she goes to Phoenix. I went to Phoenix, Arizona looking for my father, and I found him, but he was, kind of just a bullshit artist, and, very meaningful relationship to me. But, he said he couldn't take me in, and, I had to get an apartment, and, but he did help me in my hangover enroll in high school the day after I met him. And then I didn't see him for 3 months. So, you know, um, but he was a character, and there's some funny stories in the book about that relationship, which I think are really part of some of my favorite stuff. Um, but then I leave him, and I go to LA, kind of, it's just basically people say, "Did you want to be an actress? Is that why you went to LA?" And I'm like, "No, it was just too hot in Phoenix." I didn't want to go back to the cold, so I came over here, and that was the big motivation. Like I said, I had no practical life skills, except what I taught myself. And you got to think too, everywhere I went, different jobs I got, I had to use a fake ID. I had to hitchhike to get there. I was too young to get a driver's license. I mean, there were many things I had to overcome along the way that you just don't think about. You know, and When you grow up in a normal, healthy, loving home, which I hope I mean, like I look at my kids and each one of them, I love them so much. It just is, I can't even express to you how much I love my children and how great they are. And they're so intelligent, so well adjusted humans. And it's the thing that I'm most proud of, obviously. But I look at them and I see how much I love them, and I just scratch my head and say, I can't understand why I wasn't loved like that. You know, it's like, I mean, that's really at the heart of the story. Like, why? How could that be that I wasn't loved in the way I love my kids? It just seems.
Right.
So I think that's why I wrote the book. I wanted to claim back some little piece of my childhood, some little part of me, some little part of my innocence, you know, and so I did it. I think it was a very brave thing to do, but I've gotten great support from people for writing it, so I'm really happy, even from my clients.
Nice. So, so do you have plans for another book, a sequel or
Yes,
a
I
second
do.
thing? Okay.
Yes, I
And
do.
what?
I'm actually working on two different pieces. One is a novel, but it's kind of based a little bit on some of my experiences again, but I'm going to fictionalize.
Okay.
I don't want to write another memoir. Um, and I think like if, so that's that book, and it's coming along really well. I've got the ending, which is kind of a shocker, which I'm really excited about. That's the brilliance of fiction is, you can take reality and then you can twist and bend it and make it anything you want, like a Gumby doll. It's like, whereas with a memoir, you have to be very faithful to what happened. Um, so I don't want to, reveal that much about myself again. I'm just done with that. um, but so there's that book, and then the other book I'm working on is more of a coffee table book, and it's taking drawings that were made of me by the father of my daughter, who um, passed away. And when I cleaned up his estate, although I hadn't seen him in 30 years, I felt it was my responsibility because no one else was around to do it. And so I took care of closing up his estate. And he was a brilliant singer songwriter, discovered by Bob Dylan, produced by Robbie Robertson, had two albums on Warner Brothers. But then he kind of, just didn't, success just didn't happen for him, on a big level. He was a pet poet of a lot of people, but he drew me every day as a young prepubescent girl, basically naked, um, up until I got pregnant with my daughter, and then he never drew me again. And I thought, all of a sudden I was cleaning the garage, which he's a pack rat, it was just filled with junk, and this portfolio dropped down on top of my head, almost knocked me out, and I opened it, and it was the drawings, out perfectly preserved. And so I want to create a collection of his drawings because I think they're beautiful, but they're from the male gaze, right? And then I want to juxtapose that with the female gaze in my writing. Um,
Nice.
so and I really want to do some. That's kind of a passion project, and I'm going to,
That sounds cool.
yeah, that's something that I'm going to donate the proceeds for that to
Oh, interesting.
charity.
Well, well,
But
Samantha, all your work in your book, it sounds really exciting, interesting. It sounds like it's helping a lot of people, which I think is really, great, giving back to the world. And I appreciate you taking some time to talk to us about it. And we're going to talk about some author things coming up next. So thank you for sharing your book with us.
okay, well, thank you again for having me.
Thank you for listening to Discovered Wordsmiths. Come back next week and listen to another author discuss the road they've traveled, and maybe, sometime in the near future, it might be you.